All right, what's going on, guys? I'm going to be completely honest with y'all. I spent probably 25 to 30 minutes yesterday trying to film this video to make it absolutely perfect for y'all, and I just feel like it wasn't concise enough. It was all the information I wanted. It just, I think, was in such a way that it might have been a little confusing for people. So I went back through some of my notes here and tried to break it down much more simply for y'all. In this video, we are going to be focusing on Alabama rigs, umbrella rigs, everything you need to know about starting to throw one, as well as how to pick out the right one for your specific fish. I'll be completely honest, I spent so long, again yesterday, trying to film this to make it very clear and concise, and I think I can do a better job in this video as I reshoot it. So there are so many different things about the umbrella rig and Alabama rig that make it so powerful just for catching bass. Now, it was actually banned years ago from the Bassmasters and basically all major trails other than like the Costa or Toyota series. And it's just a fish catching machine. Whether it is in the wintertime, summertime, typically the most effective time is right now in the colder months once the water starts to dip down around 55 degrees. Imitating a big bait ball really seems to be one of the easiest ways to go out and catch a lot of fish. Now, there's different variations of the umbrella rig. Some have 3-wire, some have 4-wire, 5-wire, 6-wire, 7-wire, 8-wire sometimes. I've seen a lot of them also have different blades, colors, configurations. There's just so many options you can do, and it's such a powerful tool that can be in your boat if you aren't fishing a lot of major trails. Now, we're going to be talking about everything that can affect your Alabama rig, but we're really going to be focusing and hounding on the things that you can do to increase your bites, as well as what to look for on the graph, whether it is on your side scan forward-facing sonar, to determine what you need to do to your Alabama rig to get more bites. So before we run into the specifics on what to look for and different types of fish moods, and even really breaking down all the different Alabama rigs or umbrella rigs, let's talk about the one major factor that I like to focus on when I'm out on the water and I have to really think about what these fish want. A lot of the time in the winter, these fish still get pressured a lot more. I'm going to say serious anglers out on a lake or even a pond are going to be going out in the wintertime. It's just how it is. What I call fair weather fishermen typically come out here in Texas around April, and if you're up in like the northern part of the country, the fair weather fishermen start to come out, later in like May and June when those smallmouth start going. But in the wintertime, these fish can see a lot more specified pressure. So it really has transformed my fishing in the wintertime with an umbrella rig, and I really have to shift gears a lot. I really have to think about my bait choice, my weight choice, my blade choice, my line choice sometimes, and all that can be really summed up in terms of this one magic word called drag, as well as presence. Now, presence is what determines what actions I need to impart on the rig, as well as how finessey I need to get with the line. Drag refers to how it changes. The drag that I add to my Alabama rig is going to be determined by the blade size, the wire size, the rig size, the line size, whether it's braid or fluorocarbon, the drag created by my lures, whether it's a little blip minnow or something like a little Kitech or Rage Swimmer or Pro Swimmer. There's so many different options. So now we are going to take a very close look at how each of these affect each ones. I have my little concise notes here to hopefully not miss anything. And if you think I missed anything or you want to add your own comments on this, leave a comment down below. I'd greatly appreciate it. It's still going to be a longer video, but hopefully I structure it in a way that's a little easier for everyone to kind of digest. So kicking it off, one of the easiest things you can do without changing anything else on your umbrella rig, the easiest thing to do is change the weight of your umbrella rig. And simply speaking, the weight is going to come from the jig heads or the hooks that you choose to use, whether they're just 90-degree hooks without weight, if you're going towards more like a Bama strolling technique, or if you're going with ultra light jig heads. These are my personal favorite. And you can actually buy this and my favorite A-rig in a pack altogether called Sam's Perfect Umbrella Rig Package. We have a few left, and you can go get those. You get some baits, you get the hooks, you get the umbrella rig, you get a bunch of other cool stuff. Make sure to check that out. It's going to be linked below. These are my favorite. 1/16 ounce 2-aught hooks, light wire hook, and that's going to be another topic. These here, more people I see go for like 1/4 ounce or 3/16 ounce. I just don't know how they do it. This is the easiest thing you can change to have more success on the water. When you add more weight. So let's just assume, this is not how I do it, but let's just assume the typical umbrella rig gonna be something around this size, maybe 5.5 to 6 inch long wires on those. When you go from small heads like this, 1/16 of an ounce, to 1/4 ounce heads, even if you just change one of these from 1/16 to 1/4, you are going to weigh your Alabama rig down. It's going to want to sink faster, number one, and number two, you're going to have to reel faster to bring it in at a constant level. So let's run over that again. Adding weight is going to make it sink faster, and to keep it at a constant level, you're going to have to reel faster because it's going to be pulled down in the water more. Now, when it comes to changing your different weights, you can obviously offset, counter, or inversely affect the weight with a bigger bait like this, something that catches more water. So to inversely adjust for adding weight, you can adjust in the drag created by certain tails as well as profiles of baits that you throw. More often than not, I like to throw, this is my all-time favorite, a blip minnow. You can see how small those tails actually are. They don't catch a lot of water. And when you size up your lure, when you make your lure go from this little guy all the way up to this big guy with the big kicking tail that catches a lot of water, has a lot of drag, it is going to raise the drag. It's going to raise your umbrella rig up. If you don't change the weights and you just change the baits, it's going to raise that umbrella rig up, and you're going to have to reel a little bit slower to keep it at that horizontal level. So as you can see, just changing one thing to another, you can easily manipulate how your rig works, up or down, left and right. When you go to bigger heads, bigger drag, it's going to almost cancel each other out depending on how much weight you add. So just think of these things as you're throwing your Alabama rig to get your desired sink rate, your desired action, your desired speed, because all these can affect how the fish eat. Another thing that you can do, which totally changes your rig, it takes more time, it's a lot more intensive, is going to be going through and messing with blade sizing. This guy here is a big flash mob from Yum. This uses really, really big blades, and what that's going to do, it increases the drag, so it's going to be rising in the water, and it's also going to be slower and slower retrieves because these blades, they're pumping like a big spinnerbait. They're pumping like a big blade chatterbait. You're going to have to work to get this sucker in. On the inverse, something like this, the mini blades of glory, it has small, itty bitty tiny blades like that guy right there. I mean, this blade is no bigger than an inch, and it's not going to have a lot of drag. So it's going to sink faster. Sink might not be the right word for the blades, but I'm just going to say it sinks faster. It's going to fall easier. Easier is probably the better word. It's going to fall easier, and you're going to have to reel quicker to get it in at a horizontal level. When it comes to wire size, this also is going to be along with the blades. The bigger the presence, the bigger, wider your bait typically is, the slower you're going to have to reel it in, and the more it's going to want to rise up. So as it comes to each of these different variables on your Alabama rig, just be conscious of that. If you go from this guy all the way down to this guy, I would either suggest, if you don't want to change your weight and you don't want to change your baits, I would suggest going and changing your line. Now, if you don't have ultra clear water, this probably isn't an issue for you. But if you have ultra clear water, presence in the water makes a big deal. Going from braid to fluoro to mono, depending on what you want to throw, presence in the water is huge. Now, let's think about this again from a drag perspective. Fluorocarbon and monofilament will have the least amount of drag in the water, presumably if you don't have just an absurd line diameter. Bigger line diameters create more drag in the water, making that bait want to rise up, and you're going to have to reel typically a little bit slower to get that desired horizontal effect because there's so much drag. Now, fluorocarbon as well as monofilament, they also don't have a lot of abrasion through the water. So if you are throwing braid, and it does not make too much of a difference, the braided line, such as like this J-Braid X8, it has a lot of abrasion. It has a lot of strands, and it has a lot of abrasion and abrasiveness through the water. Just like you think about fishing like a frog or heavy cover, it's cutting through. It's able to cut through all that vegetation. Whereas something smooth and slick like the Seagar Smackdown, or even something like the Power Pro Super Slick, it is very smooth. It comes through the water a little bit easier, so this has less drag than this guy in the water. So less drag again, it's going to want to sink faster as well as just move through the water easier, and you can reel a little bit slower. Now that we've kind of run over all the things that can really affect your Alabama rig on the more simple level, let's kind of talk about what I like to look for when it comes to different bait choices as well as different Alabama rig choices. And I guess we're also going to have to talk about retrieve speed as well. So when it comes down to looking for specifics on what fish do I need to target, or what bait fish can I imitate to reach desired outcome, which is the fish to bite, what I have noticed in the early fall time is typically these bait balls are very isolated. They're coming out of their summer moods, and these bait fish typically like to move a little bit shallower, and they typically get split up into smaller and smaller bait balls as they get eaten throughout the fall time, the fall transition. That's why a crankbait can be so effective. It seems like a rogue shad going off on its own, and it's a very easily targetable meal for a largemouth bass or whatever you're going for with an Alabama rig. Now, as it starts to get colder and colder and colder, and I'm talking around that, low 60s to 55 to 50, I'm talking about lots and lots of bait ultra grouped up as they start moving back out using the main river channel or secondary creeks or drains or anything like that. These fish seem to really group up, and that's when I'll go to bigger and bigger Alabama rigs that tend to have a little bit more presence. One of my favorites to imitate big bait balls is the Shane's Baits Dominator. It has 8 blades, 5 wires, so for a total of 13 different little presentations on that. It has a lot of flash and it has a lot of drag. So one of those techniques that I really like to use, since it already has a lot of drag, and I typically don't like to weigh my Alabama rigs down with a lot of weight, is just going to a smaller and smaller bait fish. That's why I land on the blip minnow so much, because it does a great job at imitating a bait fish, very similar to the blades on that Dominator, as well as just keying in on a bigger bait ball that's very, very coherent as well. That's another thing that I like to do. I don't like putting bigger baits on smaller Alabama rigs, especially if the blades are at least like half the size. I like to have my blades very, very similar. Now, when it goes to the ultra big sizes, like my really, really big Alabama rigs, it doesn't matter too much to me. Some flash is good, but I mean, those baits are already so big that they key in on the bait anyway. But again, going back to my preference on choosing a bait is going to be really determined by the season, as well as where your lake is in its progression moving into the winter transition. Now, this will change again. It shifts here back and forth, whether it's a big presentation or a small presentation. when it comes to the overall rig size as well as number of presentations, because there's rigs out there that have like 16 blades and like 8 arms. There comes a point, I think, in that pre-spawn time where I will shift back to something very small, like the mini blades of glory, to target specific fish. And again, each fish in each body of water is a little bit different, whether you're going for largemouth or smallmouth or spotted bass. Each one is different. Here in Texas, I notice a definite shift from the small bait balls in the fall to big bait balls in the winter, shifting back to small bait balls, and then shifting back to big bait balls. And it really just depends where those fish are in that transition time. So moving along to one of the other things that I like to look for on my graph when it goes to that, finding the big bait balls. You can do that on down scan, you can do that on side scan, obviously forward facing sonar, very easy to do. And if you don't know what like big bait balls typically look like, here's my graph. If you're going on down scan, which is typically for me at least a smaller section of my screen, just look for it to be filled out in a certain water depth, kind of like this right here. I hope it shows up. It's very white on the screen there, but just look for a lot of clouds at a certain depth, and you should be able to determine where and how that bait is grouped up. And again, moving back towards the weighting of your Alabama rig, if that bait is super low, try to match that, add a little bit more bait, or add a little bit more weight to your Alabama rig. If that bait is super high in the water column, don't try to go under it. A lot of the time, these bass will be more than willing to shoot through that school, if not come up right to the bottom of it. And if you present something a little more unnatural, let's say the bait is super high in the water column and you bring something down along the bottom, a lot of the time they're not tricked by it, as well as typically wherever that bait ball is schooled up at, those bass won't be too far below them, keeping an eye on them. If you go too low, that bass, its eyes are on the top of its head, so a lot of the time they won't actually even see your rig if you go too low and you have too much weight. Another thing on side scan, if you're side scanning out and you know how side scan works, a lot of the time, you've got your center line and then you have your bottom on each side. So you've got other stuff going across. Here's your center line. Here's the bottom. So all this is this is the water column under your boat to the left and right. And then you've got your bottom contour on each side. So you can easily find where that bait is on those two columns that go through each of those. Forward-facing sonar is very easy. You're taking a slice out of the water as you look through, and you can easily tell. It will show you where that bait is, and it should show you where the fish are a lot easier than the side scan or down scan. When it comes to picking out how fast I have to move my lures. Again, going back to the drag, everything affects this. The weight, the rig size, the lure choice, as well as your line. How fast do you need your Alabama rig to go? Well, if these fish are roaming around open water around almost zero cover, more often than not, they are more willing to chase your Alabama rig, especially with heavier weights as well as smaller profiles. They are more willing to chase. If they are stuck down on pieces of cover like stumps, brush piles, let's say there's a sunken dock or any sort of structure that has some sort of verticalness to it, like a brush pile coming off the bottom, a stump coming up, a tree, a laydown that does move really, really high, comes off like 6 feet off the bottom, consider that pretty close to a brush pile. These are all pieces of cover that bass like to feel safe in. Let's say there's a little transition, like a wind transition, where it's coming out of the north and it shifts to the south, or something like rain or some other big weather event that can really mess the lake up when it comes to currents as well as like water clarity. A lot of these times, bass will lock down like they normally would if they were up shallow, and you have to put something on their heads. I'm sure you've heard that before, where you have to put a lure on the fish's head for it to eat. The same approach applies when it comes to picking out your weights and your drag from each of these. I typically, especially if they're on very isolated cover, I like to go to very light weights and then inversely put on a little bit bigger kicking bait, something that can really sit but still have enough action. Something like this Pro Swimmer is kind of like in the middle. It doesn't have a lot of action dead walking or dead strolling, which is another technique that I really like to do. Almost no weight on it, lots of dummies. And I'm just Bama strolling / dead strolling where I literally don't move it. And I'm just bringing a just bait ball across where this fish is. So let's say this is a habitat for a fish, you know, it's like a little brush pile, and that fish is sitting somewhere inside of it. I'm dead strolling like this. I am bringing these bigger profile baits right to them, right to their house, and you know, they're just gonna come up and hopefully smoke it if they actually see it, which is another thing. Water clarity can really affect what baits you need to throw. Something like this Pro Blue Blip Minnow is almost transparent, translucent. They won't actually be able to see it, but you know, you can go to a pearl white, flash white, something like that, and then still get those fish to eat. Now, there's also Alabama rigs out there that have chartreuse blades, gold blades, red blades. I've seen so many different types of them. I've got a whole boat full of these to where I can modify and just play around with my Alabama rigs. Now, I hopefully gave you enough information here to where you can go out on your own. Even if you're fishing a pond, a stream, there are so many great options for you. Again, one of my all-time favorites is going to be this mini blades with 3 1/16 ounce jig heads from Picasso, 3 blip minnows on those, and then 2 dummies on the top, either with a screw lock or just being lazy and clipping them on there with the clips supplied in on this mini blades. And that's kind of what I got. I'm sure it's still a longer video, but hopefully I covered all the different topics that should hopefully give you the best chance of going out and having success on the water. Last thing I will say, when it comes down to the combo, again, you're just gonna have to match the weight. If you have a rig that pulls a lot of drag, a very heavy rig, you're gonna need a heavier and heavier rod. My go-to for the mini blades is like a 7'2", medium heavy to heavy, nothing crazy because it has so little weight, it's such a light rig. If I'm throwing something like this that has a lot of weight and a lot of drag because of the big blades, I might go up to something like a 7'6", 7'9", heavy because of that extra weight. Personally, I only throw fluorocarbon on my Alabama rigs. This guy right here, the Defiant Heavy Cover 18.4, has been one of my all-time favorites. It has very minimal stretch, ultra abrasion resistant, and is super, super strong, and a thin diameter, which is another thing. It actually works very, very well even for lighter Alabama rigs. If you're just a braid guy, braid to leader is totally cool. Do what you want to do. I don't typically throw a lot of braid because it has no stretch. I'm using lighter hooks. And another thing, if you're using heavier hooks, if you look at this 1/16 ounce hook and you say, damn, that hook is too light, I'm gonna bend it, get a heavier and heavier rod, because you have to make sure these hooks actually get into the fish's mouth, go all the way through. It's winter time, it's cold. A lot of the times as they come out of winter, their mouths are going to be very, very hard and gummy, which means hook penetration is a humongous thing. So you gotta check your hooks, make sure you drive them, make sure your line's strong enough. And there's so many different variables that I couldn't possibly hit every single one of them in a video without boring you to death. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did and it helped you, please leave a like on it. Let me know down in the comments any of your thoughts. If you want to add anything, please do that. It helps the video out. And if you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing to the channel. And we'll see you in the next video here at Lake Pro Tackle. Thanks for watching, guys. See ya.